Good morning. This is Ron. It is Saturday, March the 10th. Welcome to Story Time. Today, from Philosophy Who Needs It by Ayn Rand, Chapter 8, From the Horse's Mouth, and it's a fairly short chapter. While recovering from an illness, I had a chance to catch up on some reading I'd wanted to do for a long time. Opening one interesting book, I almost leapt out of bed. I read some statements which shocked me much more profoundly than any of today's pronouncements in the news magazines or on the op-ed page of the New York Times. I've been reporting on some of those journalistic writings occasionally as a warning against the kind of intellectual dangers and booby traps they represented. But they looked like cheap little graffiti compared to the sweep of wholesale destruction presented in a few sentences of that book. Just as, at the end of Atlas Shrugged, Francisco saw a radiant future contained in a few words, so I saw the long, dismal, slithering disintegration of the 20th century held implicitly in a few sentences. I wanted to scream a warning, but it was too late. That book had been published in 1898, written by Friedrich Paulsen. It is entitled Immanuel Kant, His Life and Doctrine. Professor Paulsen is a devoted Kantian, but, judging by his style of writing, he is an honest commentator, in the sense that he does not try to disguise what he is saying. There are three attitudes of the mind towards reality which lay claim to truth: religion, philosophy, and science. In general, philosophy occupies an intermediate place between science and religion. The history of philosophy shows that the task consists simply in mediating between science and religion. It seeks to unite knowledge and faith, and in this way to restore the unity of the mental life. As in the case of the individual, it mediates between the head and the heart. So in society, it prevents science and religion from becoming entirely strange and indifferent to each other, and hinders also the mental life of the people from being split up into a faith-hating science and a science-hating faith or superstition. This means that science and mystic fantasies are equally valid as methods of gaining knowledge, that reason and feelings, the worst kinds of feelings, fear, cowardice, self-abnegation, have equal value as tools of cognition, and that philosophy, the love of wisdom, is a contemptible middle-of-the-roader whose task is to seek a compromise, a détente between truth and falsehood. Professor Paulsen's statement is an accurate presentation of Kant's attitude. But it is not Kant that shocked me. It is Paulsen. Philosophic system builders such as Kant set the trends of a nation's culture, for good or evil. But it is the average practitioners who serve as a barometer of a trend's success or failure. What shocked me was the fact that a modest commentator would start his book with a statement of that kind. I thought, no, hoped, that in the 19th century a man upholding the cognitive pretension of religion to an equal footing with science would have laughed off any serious lectern, would have been laughed off any serious lectern. I was mistaken. Here was Professor Paulsen casually proclaiming in the 19th century that philosophy is the handmaiden of theology. Existentially, i.e., in regard to conditions of living, scale of achievement, and rapidity of progress, the 19th century was the best in Western history. Philosophically, it was one of the worst. People thought that they had entered an era of inexhaustible radiance, but it was merely the sunset of Aristotle's influence, which the philosophers were extinguishing. If you have felt an occasional touch of wistful envy at the thought that there was a time when men went to the opening of a new play, and what they saw was not hair or grease, but Cyrano de Bergerac, which opened in 1897, take a wider look. I wish that, borrowing from Victor Hugo's Notre Dame de Paris, someone had pointed to the Paulsen book, then to the play, and said, "This will kill that." But there was no such person. I do not mean to imply that the Paulsen book had so fateful an influence. I am citing the book as a symptom, not a cause. The cause and the influence were Kant's. Paulson merely demonstrates how thoroughly that malignancy had spread through Western culture at the dawn of the 20th century. The conflict between knowledge and faith, Paulson explains, has extended through the entire history of human thought, and Kant's great achievement, he claims, consisted in reconciling them. The critical Kantian philosophy solves the old problem of the relation of knowledge and faith. Kant is convinced that by properly fixing the limits of each, he has succeeded in furnishing a basis for an honorable and enduring peace between them. Indeed, the significance and vitality of his philosophy will rest principally upon this. It is his philosophy's enduring merit to have drawn for the first time with a firm hand and in clear outline the dividing line between knowledge and faith. This gives to knowledge what belongs to it, the entire world of phenomena for free investigation. It conserves, on the other hand, to faith its eternal right to the interpretation of life and the world from the standpoint of value. This means that the ancient mind-body dichotomy, which the rise of science had been healing slowly as men were learning how to live on Earth, was revived by Kant, and man was split in two, not with old daggers, but with a meat axe. It means that Kant gave to science the entire material world, which, however, was to be regarded as unreal, and left, conserved, one thing to faith, morality. If you are not entirely sure of which side would win in a division like that, look around you today. Material objects as such have neither value nor disvalue. They acquire value significance only in regard to a living being, particularly in regard to serving or hindering man's goals. Man's goals and values are determined by his moral code. The Kantian division allows man's reason to conquer the material world, but eliminates reason from the choice of the goals for which material achievements are to be used. Man's goals, actions, choices, and values, according to Kant, are to be determined irrationally, i.e., by faith. In fact, man needs morality in order to discover the right way to live on Earth. In Kant's system, morality is severed from any concern with man's existence. In fact, man's every problem, goal, or desire involves the material world. In Kant's system, morality has nothing to do with this world, nor with reason, nor with science, but comes via feelings from another, unknowable, noumenal dimension. If you share the error prevalent among modern businessmen and tend to believe that nonsense such as Kant's is merely a verbal pastime for mentally unemployed academicians, there we go, that it is too preposterous to be of any practical consequences, look again at the opening quotation from Professor Paulson's book. Yet it is nonsense and vicious nonsense. But, by grace of the above attitude, it has conquered the world. There is more than one way of accepting and spreading a philosophic theory. The guiltiest group, which has contributed the most to the victory of Kantianism, is the group that professes to despise it, the scientists. Adopting one variant or another of logical positivism, a Kantian offshoot, they rejected Kant's noumenal dimension, but agreed that the material world is unreal, that reality is unknowable, that science does not deal with facts, but with constructs. They rejected any concern with morality, agree that morality is beyond the power of reason or science, and must be surrendered to subjective whims. Now observe the breach between the physical sciences and the humanities. Although the progress of theoretical science is slowing down by reason of a flawed epistemology, among other things, the momentum of the Aristotelian past is so great that science is still moving forward, while the humanities are bankrupt. Spatially, science is reaching beyond the solar system, while temporally, the humanities are sliding back into the primeval ooze. Science is leading men to the moon and monitoring radio emissions from other galaxies, while astrology is the growing fashion here on Earth. While courses in astrology and black magic are given in colleges, while horoscopes are sent galloping over the airwaves of great scientific achievement, television. Scientists are willing to produce nuclear weapons for the thugs who rule the Soviet Russia, just as they were willing to produce military rockets for the thugs who ruled Nazi Germany. There was a story in the press that during the first test of an atomic bomb in New Mexico, Robert Oppenheimer, head of the Los Alamos group who had produced the bomb, carried a four-leaf clover in his pocket. More recently, there was a theory of Edgar Mitchell, an astronaut who conducted ESP experiments on his way to the moon. There was the story of a space scientist who is a believer in occultism and black magic. Such is the honorable and enduring peace between knowledge and faith, achieved by the Kantian philosophy. Now, what if one of those men gained political power and had to consider the question of whether to unleash a nuclear war? As a Kantian, he would have to make his decision not on the grounds of reason, knowledge, and facts, but on the urgings of faith, i.e., of feelings, i.e., on whim. There are many examples of Kantianism ravaging the field of today's politics in slower but equally lethal ways. Observe the farce of inflation versus compassion. The policies of welfare statism have brought this country and the whole civilized world to the edge of economic bankruptcy, the forerunner of which is inflation. Yet pressure groups are demanding larger and larger handouts to the non-productive and screaming that their opponents lack compassion. Compassion, as such, cannot grow a blade of grass, let alone of wheat. Of what use is the compassion of a man or a country who is broke, i.e., who has consumed his resources, is unable to produce, and has nothing to give away? If you cannot understand how anyone can evade realities to such an extent, you have not understood Kantianism. Compassion is a moral term, and moral issues, to the thoroughly Kantianized intellectuals, are independent of material reality. The task of morality, they believe, is to make demands with which the world of material phenomena has to comply. And since that material world is unreal, its problems or shortages cannot affect the success of moral goals, which are dictated by the noumenal real reality. Dear businessmen, why do you worry about 0.5% of interest on a loan or investment when your money supports the schools where those notions are taught to your children? No, most people do not know Kant's theories, nor care. What they do know is that their teachers and intellectual leaders have some deep, tricky justification. The trickier, the better, for the net result of all such theories, which the average person welcomes. Be rational, except when you don't feel like it. Note the motivation of those who accepted the grotesque irrationality of Kant's system in the first place, as declared by his admirer, Professor Paulson. There is indeed no doubt that the great influence which Kant exerted upon his age was due just to the fact that he appeared as a deliverer from unendurable suspense. The old view regarding the claims of the feelings and the understanding on reality had been more and more called into question during the second half of the 18th century. Science seemed to demand the renunciation of the old faith. On the other hand, the heart still clung to it. Kant showed a way of escape from the dilemma. His philosophy made it possible to be at once a candid thinker and an honest man of faith. Thousands of hearts have thanked him with passionate devotion. Philosophy is a necessity for a rational being. Philosophy is the foundation of science, the organizer of man's mind, the integrator of his knowledge, the programmer of his subconscious, the selector of his values. To set philosophy against reason, i.e., against man's power of cognition, is to turn philosophy into an apologist for and a protector of superstition, which is such a crime against humanity that no modern atrocities can equal it. It is the cause of modern atrocities. If Paulson is representative of the 19th century, the 20th never had a chance. But if men grasp the source of their destruction, if they dedicate themselves to the greatest of all crusades, a crusade for the absolutism of reason, the 21st century will have a chance once more. And that was Chapter 8 of Philosophy Who Needs It, and it is called From the Horse's Mouth. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that Kantianism she refers to as more of a cultural blight, but it has as much. It really is a countercultural phenomenon. It is what the American counterculture uses to try to overwhelm and overcome Aristotelian influences, i.e., reason. And one of the quotes I thought was interesting, or one of the, let's see if we have it here. The task of morality, they believe, is to make demands with which the world of material phenomenon has to comply. And that reminds me very much of a lot of what you see in a lot of colleges now with the students that are called snowflakes, in which they make demands and they expect that teachers and administrators, etc., are going to alter reality in order to make those demands and equally a reality. And then the issue, let's see. Well, then the issue also, one of the things where you can see Kantianism in action in our society today is whenever you listen to people that are talking, particularly on TV or the radio, and when they're making statements, and listen to see if they make a value statement. Okay, say what should happen or shouldn't happen, what is right, what is wrong. And you will find very rarely do they do that. What they succeed in doing, the American counterculture, and that other people listening to them are aping, is instead of making value judgments, i.e., ethical judgments, what they do is they make ontological statements, which is ontology is the study of existence. So they simply describe what exists rather than saying whether or not it should exist or whether or not it should change. They just simply spend their time, like I said, describing what exists or what is. And so anytime you hear somebody doing that and avoiding it, if you're in a conversation with your family, friends, somebody at the store, and you hear them avoiding making a value judgment, feel free to press them on it. Excuse me, but what are you talking about? And when they reply again, then you can come back and say, okay, what is your point? Because when you ask somebody what their point is, what you're asking them to do is to make a value judgment. Such and such is right, such and such is wrong, such and such should be changed, such and such is no good, etc. Then you're getting somewhere. Then your conversation is worth having. Okay, and once they do that, and also when you're dealing with anybody on the left, I've always said if they're going to win, make them earn it. Make them earn it. Don't just go along with whatever it is that they say. Challenge. And if they can go ahead and rise to that challenge, then you have to consider the possibility that you are wrong. Somewhere you misstated a fact, or your logic is incorrect or something, and consider changing your mind. But you're going to find that all of the time with the left, because the left knows that socialism can't happen in a reasonable setting, that it has to have something that is superstitious, etc., in order to be able to perpetrate it on the world. So they're not going to. No socialist is ever going to go ahead and make a reasonable argument. They're not going to state their point because it's not what they want to do. What they want to do is bully and intimidate and manipulate people into going along with whatever it is that they say or do. So that's like I said, the chapter 8, the end of that. And tomorrow is going to be chapter 9, Kant versus Sullivan, which was written in 1970. And until then, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.